been a little over a year since I moved into my apartment. It's small, just a one-bedroom place in an older building, but it's mine. The kind of place where the floors creak when you walk and the walls are a bit thin. But I've gotten used to the quirks. The neighborhood isn't too bad either, quiet for the most part. A few times I've heard sirens or arguments in the street, but nothing out of the ordinary for city living. That night started like any other. I just finished a long day of work and had taken a hot shower to unwind. I was in the middle of brushing my teeth when I heard a faint knock at the door. It was so soft that, at first, I thought I'd imagined it. I stopped for a second, toothbrush still in my mouth, and listened. Nothing. Shrugging it off, I finished brushing and got ready for bed. It was close to midnight and I was exhausted. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand and checked the time. No messages, no missed calls. I placed it face down and crawled under the covers. Just as I was about to drift off, there it was again. Another knock. This time it was louder and clearer. I sat up in bed, my heart starting to race a little. I wasn't expecting anyone. No one had called or texted to say they were stopping by, and at this hour it seemed unlikely that anyone would. Maybe it was one of my neighbors. I slid out of bed and tiptoed to the door, careful not to make any noise. I've always been paranoid about late-night visitors, especially living alone. I peered through the peephole, holding my breath, but saw nothing. The hallway was empty. A shiver ran down my spine, but I brushed it off. Maybe it was a prank. Kids in the building could have been messing around, knocking on random doors to freak people out. I double-checked that the door was locked, turned off the lights, and went back to bed, feeling slightly uneasy but not scared. As I lay there trying to fall asleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Every creak of the floorboards and every distant sound from outside seemed amplified in the darkness. My mind started racing, conjuring up images of someone lurking just outside my door, waiting for the right moment to, "No, stop it," I told myself. "You're being paranoid." But then it happened again. This time it wasn't just a knock. It was a slow, deliberate scratching sound, like someone was dragging something sharp across the wood of my door. My heart skipped a beat. This wasn't a prank. I sat up in bed, the sound growing louder, more insistent. Someone was outside my apartment, and they were trying to get in. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, my hands trembling as I unlocked it. I debated whether to call 911 or not. What if it was just someone who'd had too much to drink and thought they were at the wrong apartment? But what if it wasn't? What if someone was trying to break in? The scratching continued, and I could hear a faint rattling, like whoever was out there was trying to pick the lock. My heart pounded in my chest, adrenaline surging through my veins. I quickly texted my neighbor across the hall, Emily. We weren't close, but we exchanged pleasantries in the hallway from time to time. "Hey, are you home? Someone's at my door and it's freaking me out," I typed out, my fingers shaking. Minutes passed with no response. The scratching grew more aggressive, and now I could hear someone fiddling with the doorknob. I was out of time. I dialed 911. My voice was barely a whisper as I explained the situation to the operator. She told me to stay on the line, to stay quiet, and that officers were on their way. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me, and backed away from the door, phone still pressed to my ear. The operator stayed with me, her calm voice a lifeline as I stood in the middle of my dark apartment, every noise making me flinch. The scratching had stopped, but now there was a soft thud, like someone was pressing their weight against the door, testing it. I tried to keep my breathing steady, but my chest felt tight, and my mind raced with all the possibilities of who could be on the other side of that door and what they wanted. "Do you see anyone?" the operator asked, her voice steady. I shook my head, then realized I needed to speak. "No," I whispered. I don't know who it is. They're still at the door. I think they're trying to get in." "Stay calm. Officers are on their way. Do you have a way to defend yourself, just in case?" My eyes darted around the room. I didn't have a weapon, but my kitchen was nearby. "I have a knife," I said, already moving toward the kitchen, phone still glued to my ear. "Good. Stay where you are, but be prepared just in case." I grabbed the biggest kitchen knife I could find and retreated to my bedroom, clutching it with both hands. I wasn't sure what I'd do if the door opened, but holding the knife made me feel a little less helpless. The seconds dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity. I strained to hear any sound from outside, but there was nothing. Now just silence. I checked my phone, but still no response from Emily. Maybe she wasn't home, or maybe I didn't want to think about it. A few minutes later, I heard the faint sound of sirens in the distance. Relief washed over me, but it was quickly followed by a new wave of fear. What if the person at my door ran before the cops got here? What if they were still in the building, waiting? The sirens grew louder, and I heard the screech of tires as the police pulled up outside. I stayed on the phone with the operator, waiting for her to confirm that the officers were entering the building. "They're coming up to your floor now," she said, her voice still calm and professional. I heard footsteps in the hallway and then a loud knock at the door. "Police, open up." I hurried to the door, looking through the peephole once more. This time, I saw two uniformed officers standing outside. I unlocked the door with shaking hands and opened it just a crack, keeping the chain on. One of the officers, a tall man with a stern expression, gave me a nod. "Ma'am, we received a call about someone trying to break in." I quickly undid the chain and let them in. Yes, there was someone, was scratching at the door. I think they were trying to pick the lock. I didn't see them, but I could hear it. The officers exchanged a glance before one of them walked back into the hallway, checking around. The other stayed with me, asking more questions. When it started, what I'd heard, if I'd seen anything unusual before tonight. I tried to answer as best I could, but my mind was still racing. I kept glancing toward the door, half expecting whoever it was to burst in at any moment. After a few minutes, the second officer returned, shaking his head. "No one's in the hallway, and no signs of forced entry, but there are scratches on the lock. Someone was messing with it." I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't just my imagination. Someone had been trying to break in. "We'll do a sweep of the building," the first officer said, "but it's possible whoever it was took off when they heard us coming." They stayed with me for a little while longer, making sure I was okay and reassuring me that they'd patrol the area for the rest of the night. Before they left, they gave me their contact information and told me to call if I noticed anything else unusual. After they were gone, I locked the door and put the chain back on. Then I dragged a chair over and wedged it under the doorknob, just in case. It was nearly 2 a.m. by the time I crawled back into bed. But sleep was impossible. Every creak, every distant noise outside made my heart race. I kept replaying the night in my head, wondering what would have happened if I hadn't called 911. The next day, I called my landlord and asked about installing a better lock, maybe even a security camera. He was reluctant at first, but after I told him what had happened, he agreed. For the next week, I jumped at every sound, every knock at the door, even during the day. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching, waiting for another chance. It wasn't long after that I decided to move out. I couldn't stay there, not after what had happened. Even with the new lock and the police patrolling the area, I couldn't shake the fear that whoever had been at my door that night would come back. And what terrified me the most was the thought that they hadn't just chosen my apartment at random.